A man struck a 53-year-old woman on public transit, mistakenly believing she was alone and vulnerable. He was unaware that her husband held the position of the most respected officer in town. It had been a challenging day, characterized by delays and setbacks. When Vanessa Kirkland arrived at the Blue Line platform in downtown Sacramento, her heels were causing discomfort, her back ached, and she was 2 missed calls behind schedule on her way to the train. The time was approaching 6:15 p.m. The sun had already begun to descend behind the old courthouse building. She looked at her phone, but did not check the notifications. Not tonight. Vanessa was 53, possessing a sharp mind, a warm voice, and consistently wearing her silver-framed glasses and demonstrating patience. She worked as a lead advocate at a nonprofit legal center, experiencing long days, emotionally draining environments, and paperwork that was constant. Nevertheless, she wouldn't trade it. Assisting individuals, particularly families navigating a system they found perplexing or untrustworthy, felt like a duty, not merely a profession. As the train arrived, she boarded and looked for a place to sit. Limited space was available. She located a partially filled row towards the center and settled in with a soft exhale, placing her tote bag next to her. The atmosphere was largely peaceful. Passengers were absorbed in their phones, listening to music or browsing on screens. A teenager in a school hoodie, chewing gum and watching something with the volume a little too high, sat directly across from her. 2 seats to her left, a couple of nurses still in scrubs spoke softly in Spanish. It was nothing out of the ordinary. The train began to move. Vanessa rested her head and breathed out. She considered dinner, likely just leftovers. Perhaps she would reheat that lentil stew, or possibly just cereal and a long bath. Her thoughts wandered. But then a voice arose. It was loud, rapid, and smug. "Excuse me, I'm going to ask you something." She didn't move at first, just opened her eyes slowly. Across the aisle, a man had gotten on at the last stop. Mid-20s, tall, wiry, and loud, wore a sleeveless hoodie and had headphones around his neck. He was looking straight at her, grinning. Vanessa blinked once, didn't say a word. He leaned a little closer. "I'm serious. You're sitting up here as if you're running for mayor." Wearing a complete church ensemble, I observed her. A nearby teenager chuckled softly. The man visibly straightened, seeming to relish the attention. "You must be going somewhere important, ma'am," he stated. She remained silent. Adjusting her glasses, she maintained a dignified posture and subtly turned her head toward the window. However, he wasn't finished. He began pacing with deliberate, measured steps down the aisle, gesturing at various passengers. "People like her," he declared, "always act as if they are superior. Sit straight, avert your gaze, and remain silent." It seemed as though others judged us harshly. People began to notice. A woman near the front briefly looked back before quickly averting her gaze. A young man behind Vanessa subtly reached for his phone. Vanessa felt no surge of panic. Years of practice had taught her to remain composed during confrontations. She recognized this behavior, a display of confidence fueled by the desire for attention. A man who felt more powerful when others appeared diminished. She spoke calmly. "You should take a seat." Her voice was even, neither raised nor trembling, simply resolute. The man paused. He paused, appearing hesitant. Then, he tilted his head. "Oh, are you giving orders now? Do you have a badge or something?" Vanessa remained unmoved. "No, but you're embarrassing yourself in front of a train full of strangers." His smile briefly wavered. Then he moved closer, too close. However, the atmosphere in the car shifted. People were observing now, more than previously. There was tension, certainly, but also a sense of anticipation, as if everyone was awaiting the next development. Vanessa remained still, her gaze fixed on him, her hands resting in her lap. He smirked. "You got a mouth on you. Let's see if you talk like that when I'm a little closer." But he didn't know who he was addressing, and he was about to discover that the hard way. The train rattled forward, cutting through the city as if oblivious to the escalating tension inside Car 7. The man, later identified as Kyle Dunham, aged 26, with a record full of petty nonsense, stood inches from Vanessa now. A subtle aroma of malt liquor and mint gum emanated from his breath. He lowered himself, observing her with the gaze of a child studying a motionless doll, anticipating her to break eye contact first. She remained steadfast. "You're one of those strong, independent types, huh?" He expectorated. "Always got something smart to say when there's people around to protect you. But you on your own now, sweetheart." Vanessa released a barely perceptible sigh, the kind intended to convey disappointment, not weariness. "I'm not on my own," she stated. Kyle surveyed the surroundings with a flourish. "Oh, who has your back, then?" he called out, raising his voice. "Does anyone among you want to come and save Grandma over here?" He paused. "No, I didn't expect so." The word grandma stung more than he anticipated, not because of her age, but because of the implication behind it. It suggested she was diminished, that women aged and became invisible, useless, laughable, something to ridicule, not to honor. Nevertheless, she remained composed. "You're embarrassing yourself," she stated gently. "That's what bullies do when they are afraid." Kyle appeared startled, freezing in place. "How do you know my name?" he demanded. Vanessa subtly shifted forward, her voice remaining composed. "You mentioned it earlier, on the phone, prior to boarding the train. That was a deception." He denied having done so, but her statement unnerved him, prompting him to question what else she might know. "You're crazy," he mumbled. Vanessa turned back toward the window, not in a dismissive manner, but as if he were insignificant. This was the catalyst. Kyle's pride couldn't withstand the rejection. The audience had fallen silent. His performance was unsuccessful, and a bitter expression tightened his features. "Finish speaking now?" he demanded. "All that talking, and now you're afraid?" Vanessa remained silent, so he gently nudged her shoulder, a clear indication that this was no longer a verbal exchange. A sharp intake of breath came from the rear of the vehicle immediately. Vanessa raised her gaze slowly, maintaining her composure and silence. "Kyle," she stated, "this is your final opportunity to take a seat and depart with some measure of self-respect." Kyle's thoughts had vanished. He was consumed by anger. Humiliated, vulnerable, and needing to regain command, he struck her. The sound was distinct, a smack of skin against skin. Her glasses moved slightly. Her head tilted a little due to the impact. Exclamations arose, escalating into a commotion. People stood up. Phones appeared. A voice called out from the rear. Vanessa simply blinked, then remained still. She carefully straightened her glasses, neatly arranged a strand of hair behind her ear, then fixed her gaze directly upon him. "You have just committed a significant error." Kyle hesitated briefly, his hands still raised, his breathing now shallow. "Who do you think you are?" he asked, his voice softer. She inclined her head. "You'll find out soon enough." Two rose back. The young man who had been quietly recording rose and walked to the rear of the car. He had observed something in her eyes, something unyielding, not fearful. It prompted his movement. A voice murmured, "She's important. I believe she's someone." Another voice followed. "Is that the chief's wife?" "That's the police chief's wife." And now Kyle was hearing the murmur. "What?" he said. No one answered, but the mood in the car shifted. It had gone from outrage to recognition. This wasn't just a woman on a train anymore. This was somebody. Vanessa stayed still. Her cheek stung. Her hand trembled just a little in her lap, but she didn't let it show. Instead, she reached for her phone, opened a text, typed 5 words, "Call me when you can." Sent. She glanced upward, not toward Kyle, but at the doors. The train was one stop from Curtis Park Station, and that was the extent of his remaining time. Curtis Park Station was less than 2 minutes away now. But for all those inside the train car, time began to lengthen. No one was speaking anymore. Not genuinely. There were hushed tones, murmurs, yes. But the atmosphere had changed, becoming concentrated and oppressive. Kyle sensed it. He disliked it. He positioned himself in the middle of the aisle, as if he had something yet to demonstrate. His gaze now moved frequently, scanning the passengers who avoided eye contact. He observed those recording, resenting their lack of laughter. They weren't fearful of him, either. Not anymore. "Man, you're tripping," he mumbled. She started it, trying to appear superior. No one reacted. Across from him, Vanessa had repositioned her tote onto her lap. Her fingers were clenched around the straps, her thumb rhythmically stroking a small stitched detail. She felt no fear. However, anger simmered within her. A quiet anger, an anger that held back, an anger that was justified. Her skin still felt hot. The mark of his hand remained visible. She refrained from touching it. Maintaining a composed stance, she kept her shoulders straight. She was aware of the scrutiny, not only from those with phones, but also from the observant individuals who had witnessed similar incidents and felt powerless. Now, their attention was on her, and so was Kyle's. "You think you're better than me," he hissed suddenly. "That's what this is. You people always act like you're too good." Vanessa finally looked at him. Her voice was low. "I don't think I'm better than you. I think you're making choices you're going to regret." "You threatening me?" He shot back. "No," she said. "I'm warning you. There's a difference." The train gave a mechanical groan as it began slowing into Curtis Park. The lights flickered once overhead. Kyle turned toward the door, fidgeting. A woman 2 seats down whispered something to her boyfriend. He nodded subtly, moved his hand into his jacket pocket, a badge, an off-duty officer merely awaiting the signal. And then Kyle turned back one last time. "You ain't nothing but a loudmouth in a skirt," he spat. "Nobody gonna save you." And with that, he reared his hand back again. But this time someone moved. Not Vanessa, not the off-duty cop. A man, tall, with a beard and still wearing a dusty construction vest from work, moved quickly from the rear of the car. He seized Kyle's wrist as he started to swing and pulled it down forcefully. "Try that again, and I'll break your arm," the man stated, his voice calm but menacing. Kyle attempted to free himself, but was unable to. The man's grip was stronger and more resolute. "Finished?" he inquired. Kyle swore, recoiled, and stumbled toward the opposite wall of the train. He appeared like a trapped creature, snarling more from panic than from any sense of dignity. Vanessa rose. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't theatrical. Just even. She surveyed the car, noting the woman with her phone, the young man in the hoodie, the child in the back feigning disinterest. Then she looked at Kyle. "I won't file charges for what you just did," she stated, her voice clear enough for everyone to hear. "But someone will. Someone invariably does. And when they do, I hope it's recorded." The train emitted a hiss as the doors opened. Curtis Park Station. Light flooded in from the platform. There, on the platform, accompanied by 2 plainclothes officers, stood Darius Kirkland. He wasn't wearing a uniform. It wasn't necessary. He wore a black button-down shirt and slacks, and his expression was stern and intense. He boarded the train. Silence filled the space. Kyle stared at him, puzzled. "Who?" Darius spoke, his tone direct. Kyle remained still. Darius advanced 1 step. Now, a badge appeared, revealed with quiet assurance. The name was visible. Kirkland. Kyle's gaze shifted to Vanessa. An understanding dawned. "That name, her." Oh no," he breathed. The off-duty officer behind him placed a hand on his shoulder. "Let's go." "I didn't know." Kyle shouted. "Yo, I didn't know who she was." Darius said nothing. Vanessa stepped off the train first. She didn't look back. But the man who slapped her would never forget the moment he realized who she was, nor how close he came to losing a lot more than his pride. They walked Kyle off the platform like a child being removed from class for misbehaving. This wasn't a school setting, and no message would be sent home. The train departed behind them. Vanessa maintained a steady, even pace as she walked. Darius walked beside her, mostly silent. He didn't need to speak. His jaw was tense, not with anger, but with controlled composure. Years of policing had shown him the value of knowing when to speak and when silence was more impactful. Behind them, Kyle was guided to a bench close to the platform stairs. He was breathing rapidly, his eyes wide, still processing what had occurred. A plainclothes officer stood close by, observing with little visible emotion. Vanessa reduced her speed and then spoke softly, her voice almost a whisper. "I'm okay." Darius looked at her, his eyes showing a trace of gentleness for the first time since boarding the train. "I know you are," he replied, "but I'm not." He hesitated. I saw the entire video before I arrived. The initial message I received was from Naomi Simmons. Do you recall her? From Housing Court? Vanessa gave a single nod. She witnessed the event as it unfolded, communicating it to me in just 4 words. Is this your wife? Vanessa released a sigh that mingled amusement and weary comfort. You should have observed the child in the 3rd row, she remarked. He attempted to disappear the instant that boy began to be noisy, resembling Darren when he would feign sleep to evade tasks. Darius laughed softly. I long for that boy, she acknowledged, her eyes wandering across the platform. Many people on that train likely recognized this scenario. However, this time the events unfolded differently. He touched her shoulder gently. It's because you didn't react, she said. That alters everything. A few yards behind them, Kyle began to fall apart. Not from guilt, not yet, but from fear. The fog lifted, and the man he slapped was standing nearby, shaking hands with law enforcement, while his own hands were held beneath his thighs like a child avoiding reprimand. An officer spoke to him, and his reply was abrupt and overly loud. Darius overheard. I didn't even hit her that hard. He glanced at Vanessa, his expression remaining composed. Do you mind if I handle this? She gave an affirmative nod. I trust you. Darius then proceeded back toward Kyle, his steps deliberate and controlled, as if approaching a speaker's platform rather than a bench. Kyle sat up straighter as he noticed Darius's approach. Yo, look, I didn't know who she was, man. I didn't know she was, like, married to a cop. I believe she was simply just what? Darius interrupted. Tell me. Kyle's mouth opened, but he didn't speak. Darius sat beside him, maintaining a comfortable distance. You thought she was merely a woman. Alone. An easy target. Kyle's lips tightened, seeking an explanation. She was speaking her mind. No, Darius responded, his voice calm. She was demonstrating composure. That's not a common sight, is it? I didn't harm her in that way, though. You made contact with her. You placed your hands on her. Before an audience. Recorded on camera. And then there was another attempt. Kyle scanned the area, as if searching for support. But the platform was empty. There was no one to assist him. No one ever did for people like Vanessa. That was intentional, Darius stated. You're fortunate because she's extending understanding that others wouldn't. But don't misinterpret that as a sign of vulnerability. Kyle lowered his gaze. His earlier arrogance diminished to a smaller form. The inflated self-assurance had vanished. He appeared more like a boy now, lost, tired, and suddenly very aware of how much worse things could have been. What's going to happen to me? He asked. That depends, Darius said. Right now, you're being detained. There's an outstanding warrant on you for a missed court date from 3 months ago. Kyle's mouth dropped open. Unrelated, but not forgotten. Darius stood up. And later? That depends on what kind of man you decide to be when you walk out of holding. He turned, not waiting for a reply, and returned to Vanessa, who was now seated close to a column, eyes closed in a brief moment of quiet. However, the complete story wasn't finished, and its full impact hadn't completely arrived. At least, not yet. They didn't depart the station immediately. Vanessa had taken a place on the lengthy metal bench beside the wall, sheltered by the weathered Curtis Park sign. She sat straight, legs crossed at the ankle, and her hands were finally relaxed. A stillness had returned, the type often present after a disturbance. Darius stood a short distance away, holding a phone to his ear and speaking softly. Vanessa couldn't discern his words, but she understood his demeanor. It was the voice he employed when rectifying another's blunder. Following a few minutes, he ended the call, approached her, and sat next to her. They're taking him to county, he stated. He isn't facing charges yet for the slap. Not unless you request it. Vanessa remained silent for a moment. She wasn't trying to be elusive. She simply needed a short time to consider what was most important. I won't push, she stated following a brief silence. Let the warrant take care of it. That's sufficient for now, Darius agreed slowly, nervously biting his lower lip. He acknowledged her fortunate position. They remained seated next to each other. People passed them on the platform, some offering curious looks, some murmuring as they recognized her from the videos already in circulation. Vanessa had experienced widespread online attention previously. However, nothing like this. Typically, The shared content consisted of excerpts from her addresses at city forums or housing events. Previously, a video of her embracing a woman who had recently won a child custody case had garnered thousands of likes. However, this situation was different. Now, she was the woman on the train, and her face, still faintly marked where Kyle's hand had landed, was circulating across timelines and news feeds in real time. She anticipated the consequences: comment sections, opinions, outrage, and debate. Some might describe her as a hero. Others might perceive her as lenient for not responding in kind. Still others would likely seek to place blame. Darius broke the silence. "Remember that speech I gave last week?" He began. "About dignity, public space, and consequence?" She replied, "Yes, I was in the front row." He continued, "I said every citizen deserves to move through their city without fear. That is the baseline, not the luxury." She nodded. He went on, "When I said that, I was thinking about everyone. Children walking to school, grandparents catching the bus, teachers, nurses, grocery clerks. I hadn't been thinking about you," she acknowledged. "I know," she said gently, "and I regret that I hadn't." Vanessa turned to him. "Please don't do that." He lowered his gaze. "You shouldn't have been in that situation." She offered a brief laugh. "Do you believe I haven't faced worse?" His eyes rose. "I've lived 53 years in this skin, Darius. On this earth, in this body. I've been followed, yelled at, disrespected, dismissed, and talked over. It simply so happened they were recorded." He showed no smile. Yet, he seemed to grasp the sentiment. "You've always been stronger than I remarked. "No," she replied. "I'm simply more experienced." A train whistle echoed as a train arrived at the station. A different vehicle, different travelers, the same city. A young woman in scrubs drew near carefully, her gaze shifting between them. "Excuse me, Mrs. Kirkland?" she inquired. Vanessa turned. "Yes. I just wanted to express my gratitude," she said, "for the way you manage him, for maintaining your dignity." Vanessa rose, offered her hand. "What's your name?" Rosa replied, "I'm a nurse at St. Joseph's." "You had a long shift?" Vanessa nodded. "You take care of people all day?" "Thank you." Rosa appeared taken aback by the courtesy. She offered a small nod and departed. Darius rose to stand next to his wife. "Let's go home." But Vanessa didn't move immediately. She glanced around the platform one last time, observing the train tracks, the benches, the signage, and the flow of people as if nothing had occurred. It felt as if time had restarted. "I'll ride the train tomorrow," she stated. "Are you certain?" "Yes." And the following day, and the day after that. "I refuse to be silenced simply because someone is unfamiliar with me," Darius said, placing a gentle hand on her back. However, as they departed the station, neither of them realized the extent to which this moment would affect those beyond the train car. This became clear when the news broke. By the time they arrived at their home in Southland Park, Vanessa's phone had received more than 20 notifications. Darius had received a significant influx of communication. Friends, journalists, colleagues, and individuals they hadn't spoken to in years suddenly recalled their contact information. She chose not to respond to most of these inquiries. The incident had already been reported in the local news by 9 p.m. One news source titled their report "Community Leader Assaulted on Light Rail. Suspect Apprehended at Station." Another opted for a more dramatic headline: "Slap on the Train Sparks Debate Over Civility and Race." However, the video clips were the content that spread most rapidly. A 16-second vertical video, filmed by someone sitting 3 rows back, captured Kyle's words. "This is Arte Lance." It showed the slap and the subsequent moment where she met his gaze, appearing unaffected by his action. Within hours, the video surpassed 100,000 views, then 200, and finally 500,000. Each comment offered an opinion. Some praised her composure, others questioned why no one intervened earlier, and predictably, some found fault. Daria was sitting on the bed's edge, looking at news articles, her jaw tight. Vanessa entered from the bathroom, her face freshly washed and her hair wrapped. "You should put that away," Vanessa said. Daria looked up. "I keep reading these comments. People analyzing what you should have said, what you didn't say. It's as if you were putting on a show. That's the internet." Daria replied. I simply dislike seeing you transformed into a symbol. Vanessa lifted an eyebrow. That has been occurring since I was 13 years old. The first instance I experienced being followed in a drugstore simply for wearing lip gloss marked a turning point. Daria sighed. I know. I only wanted you to find some quiet. I have quiet, she replied. And I still do. That boy didn't deprive me of anything. In fact, he provided a space for me to express what I've always felt. He looked at her, pausing. That regardless of your identity, respect isn't gained through increased volume or physical force. It's demonstrated by how you regard those who are not indebted to you. She positioned herself beside him, carefully taking the phone from his grasp and placing it on the nightstand. You recall what you told the academy class last spring? She inquired. Which part? He responded. We don't train for revenge. We train for response. Darius chuckled softly. I borrowed that line from my grandfather. Well, you gave it meaning, she replied. It's the same reason I refrained from reacting with force today. You address situations as they arise, not according to others' expectations, but as they require. A pause. Did you see how many people were watching? She continued. If I had lost control, it wouldn't have been about him anymore. It would have become a completely different situation. Darius nodded slowly. You are correct. At that moment, a new message appeared on Vanessa's phone. This one was not from the press. It was from a mother of a high school student she'd represented 6 months earlier in a school discrimination case. She had defended him after he'd been suspended for what proved to be a false accusation by a teacher. The message stated, My son saw the video and said, That's Miss Kirkland. She's real. I just want you to know how much you matter to people like us. Thank you for being who you are. Vanessa looked at the message for a long moment. Then she gave the phone to Darius silently. He read it, exhaled, and for the first time that night, he allowed himself to smile. You matter, he said. So do you, she replied. The following morning, while they were seated together on the porch enjoying coffee, a news van leisurely drove down the street. The vehicle didn't halt, but the camera within directed its view towards the house before proceeding onward. I suspect today will be more eventful than anticipated, he remarked. I believe every day is, Vanessa replied. She rose, stretched, and retrieved her tote bag near the door. Are you going out? He asked. Yes. They require my presence at the center. We have eviction hearings scheduled for this week. I will not be absent due to someone being unable to accept a woman speaking directly. Darius also rose. Desire a lift? She offered a smile. No, I will travel by train. She observed her intently for a moment. Are you certain? I want to be visible. Identical seat, identical time. Because I'm not the one who requires anonymity. However, as Vanessa resumed her schedule, the events that transpired on that train continued to resonate far beyond the station, impacting dinner conversations, classrooms, news organizations, and homes throughout the nation. Following those initial moments, video recordings of Vanessa Kirkland were shared across newsrooms, courtrooms, break rooms, and barbershops. The incident generated discussion in locations that seldom addressed individuals like her, middle-aged, black, composed during pressure, unaffected by disorder. Podcasts featured it. Community forums offered perspectives. National broadcasters attempted to contextualize it, as though it conformed to a predetermined narrative concerning race, gender, and power. However, the situation defied easy categorization. That was its compelling quality. Despite everything, Vanessa consistently took the same train, often securing the same seat when available. Whenever someone recognized her, they would offer a nod or a quiet expression of gratitude. On one occasion, an elderly gentleman approached her to simply state, I witnessed what occurred. I'm showing my granddaughter. I told her, this is how one maintains composure during a crisis. Vanessa, however, wasn't seeking acknowledgement. That's what made her actions so meaningful. She had navigated hardships previously. The difference was that the world hadn't been documenting it. The city organized a public forum 2 weeks later. Community safety, transportation, and law enforcement relations were the focus of the meeting. The hall was full. Darius was invited to speak. Attendees anticipated a discussion about crime statistics and updated patrol approaches. However, He chose to recount the story of the train. "I wasn't present at the beginning," he stated from the podium. "I wasn't seated beside her. I didn't observe the expression in his gaze or the stillness with which she remained while others spoke. But I was present when it concluded, and what I witnessed extended beyond my wife." He embodied restraint, strength, and a level of control that most of us only discuss in theory. He paused, looking out at the crowd. Her actions transcended mere self-preservation. She demonstrated that standing your ground doesn't always require physical force. Sometimes it involves maintaining composure when someone is attempting to undermine you. Vanessa remained silent that evening. She was seated in the second row, wearing a navy blazer and black slacks, her hands resting in her lap, observing, hearing, understanding. Afterward, as they headed back to the vehicle, a young reporter stepped forward. He appeared apprehensive, holding a microphone in one hand and a phone in the other. "Mrs. Kirkland," he began, "do you believe you represent something, given what transpired?" She regarded him. "I am not a symbol," she replied. "I am a woman. I was weary. I was on the train, returning home, and someone believed that entitled them to behave as though I lacked significance, but the manner in which it was addressed. Many are describing it as impactful." She remained composed. "What's impactful," she stated, "is learning how to maintain your composure in a world that persistently attempts to disrupt it." He began to pose another inquiry, but she raised her hand subtly. "That is all," she responded. "Have a good evening." She and Darius departed into the night, and the story, though no longer dominating news coverage, persisted. It resonated in discussions among friends, in classrooms when instructors utilized it as a practical example. Reflecting on the events, many recalled the emotions they felt witnessing it, prompting introspection about their own responses, their own stillness, and their own sense of self-respect. Kyle Dunham appeared in court 3 days following his arrest. The court referenced his previous charges and imposed a 30-day detention while awaiting further investigation. Vanessa did not attend the court proceedings, stating that she had already expressed what she needed to. The legal center where she worked experienced an increase in support following the incident. Financial support arrived, and individuals registered to volunteer. A few referenced the video, but the majority expressed a desire to contribute to something impactful without needing fanfare. Vanessa Kirkland, in particular, continued her daily train journeys. That train, for better or worse, evolved into a visible representation of dignity in action. In a world often filled with distractions, individuals such as Vanessa Kirkland serve as a reminder of a truth that is often overlooked. True resilience isn't always loud. Occasionally, it remains still, speaks with composure, and stands firm. This isn't driven by a desire to triumph, but a determination to remain present. If this narrative resonated with you, prompted reflection, or evoked thoughts of someone familiar, please share it. Subscribe for further authentic stories similar to this one, highlighting how quiet strength can be more impactful than force and justice can manifest in unexpected ways. Remember, you never know who you might encounter on the train. 2 men believed it was amusing to embarrass a mother in front of her children, until a mechanic, wearing a grease-stained shirt, quietly stopped them in front of everyone in the store. Roderick Blaine, 42, hadn't intended to be a hero that evening. He had just completed a long shift at the mechanic shop off Greenwell Springs Road in Baton Rouge. His work shirt still had a faint odor of oil and sweat, and his back felt sore in that familiar, persistent way it did when the weather suggested rain. He intended to quickly purchase a few items: milk, eggs, perhaps some smoked sausage, and return home before his niece completed her homework. She had been staying with him for several weeks while her mom worked the late shift at the hospital. They had established a regular pattern: dinner, cartoons, spelling drills. He didn't even use a card, opting for a handheld basket and a mental list. The store experienced a lack of congestion, yet a palpable sense of unease hung in the air. Shoppers with weary expressions, children complaining, a hurried individual quickly maneuvering past, someone proceeding at a leisurely pace. It was the sort of atmosphere where direct glances were avoided, and all desired a swift entry and exit. Roderick was in the process of his internal review and moving towards the frozen foods area. That's when he detected it, a voice distinct, piercing, rising above the subdued sounds of checkout scanners and squeaking cartwheels. A different voice then, laced with laughter. It wasn't a pleasant sound, the type that prompted a tightening of the jaw before understanding its cause. He turned, his attention drawn to the disturbance. Two men were positioned close to the freezer doors. They appeared to be about his age, perhaps slightly younger. Both wore baseball caps. One had a Bluetooth earpiece, and the other displayed a tattoo extending up his neck. Their posture seemed relaxed, but their voices did not match. They weren't shouting, but they were acting. A young woman, likely in her early 30s, stood nearby. She was wearing a faded hoodie and attempting to manage two children, a toddler in the cart and a boy around 7 years old holding on. Her daughter was upset. Her son looked down at the floor. The woman held her SNAP card tightly. Roderick initially struggled to understand every word the men spoke, but their tone conveyed their message. They said she should have waited for a man before having so many children. He thought she likely had a different partner for each child. The man with the earpiece quietly laughed, shaking his head as if the woman were a joke. Roderick halted. He stood there, 2 feet from the frozen peas, one hand still holding his basket. He observed the woman's shoulders become rigid, her jaw tighten. However, she didn't acknowledge them. She focused on her daughter, gently moving the cart back and forth as if it were a cradle. Silence filled the space. No one intervened. He looked around the aisle. The sound registered. A teenage cashier briefly looked up. An older woman close to the produce section stood motionless, feigning interest in a label. The moment lingered, as if everyone hoped it would simply disappear. It did not. Roderick advanced. He didn't move towards the woman, nor towards the man. Just forward. His heart began its familiar, heavy rhythm, the one that accompanies the confusion of anger and shame. He recognized this feeling. It wasn't precisely the moment, but it felt similar. Different people, a different location. Still, the core message remained. He observed as the young man gently pulled at his father's coat. "Father, may we simply leave?" He crouched down, murmured something into his ear. His voice was quiet, and his hands trembled slightly as he reached into his wallet. Silas paused. He wasn't one for conflict. Not since 1998. But something about that young man's tone. Something about the way he inquired, "Can we just go?" As if the disgrace was theirs, not the adult men. It evoked a feeling within. And suddenly, Roderick forgot about the milk and eggs. However, before he could speak, the man with the earpiece added something. A statement that halted Roderick again, this time for a completely different cause. The man with the earpiece remarked, audible to several shoppers in the aisle, that if she allocated less time to accessing food stamps and more to employment, perhaps she wouldn't require assistance. The delivery of his statement was significant. He spoke loudly, seemingly intending for the entire store to overhear. The impression was that he aimed to publicly shame her. Roderick's hand tightened around the basket, his knuckles turning pale. He remained positioned back, partially obscured by the end cap displaying canned soups. From his vantage point, he observed the woman's profile. Her cheekbones were prominent, her mouth set in a firm line. She refused to offer them the gratification of a reaction, yet her tension was palpable. Her son held her waist tightly, as if securing her position. The other man, identified by the neck tattoo, bumped his companion and scoffed, "Don't waste your breath. She's probably just going to sell that food to buy a new wig." Roderick blinked. He paused, thinking he might have misunderstood. But no, that was what he had said. Still, no one reacted. The teenage cashier averted her gaze. The woman examining the fruit labels now intently checked her phone. A young man pushing a cart filled with Gatorade steered clear of them, as if avoiding something he couldn't see. It felt as though everyone was attempting to vanish. The mother tried to remain composed. She didn't raise her voice, nor did she succumb to despair. She deliberately gave her card to the cashier, her gaze fixed on the small display as if her well-being hinged on it. The toddler had become still, aware of the strained atmosphere. Roderick released a deep breath through his nose. He was observing a woman being openly humiliated for needing assistance. A woman who, judging by her appearance, seemed to be simply attempting to manage the day with her children fed and her self-respect preserved. Two adult men, appearing as though they'd avoided regular employment for some time, seemed intent on shaming her. The situation felt disturbingly recognizable. He recalled a childhood memory of standing in line with his mother around the age of 8 or 9 at a grocery store off Plank Road. He remembered the burning embarrassment of the stairs back then, the way people looked when his mom presented food stamps. She never discussed it openly. She simply told him, "Keep your head up and hold the bag, baby." The memory triggered something within him. He moved nearer, now fully visible. "Hey," he called out, the word carrying enough volume to draw the attention of both men. The individual with the earpiece lifted an eyebrow. The other offered a smirk. Roderick maintained a composed tone. "Evenly, you consistently address women in that manner, or is it only when you presume no one will object?" The men paused, appearing uncertain whether he intended it as a jest. The man bearing the tattoo chuckled faintly. "What? Your boyfriend? Or something?" Roderick shook his head. "Nah, I'm just a man who understands the difference between a joke and bullying." That seemed to surprise them. The man with the earpiece struggled to speak. Roderick moved forward. He didn't act aggressively or threaten anyone, but he positioned himself close enough to no longer be a background voice. Close enough that people in the aisle were now paying attention. "You notice a woman with her kids. She isn't causing any trouble. She was simply attempting to purchase groceries. And you decided today was the opportune moment to display how insignificant you are?" The neck tattoo guy rolled his eyes. "Man, mind your own business." Roderick didn't blink. "This is my business. Anytime I see a grown man harass a mother in front of her children as if it were entertainment, yeah, that's my business." A silence descended. Not the kind that signifies resolution. The kind that suggests a change has occurred. The woman remained standing at the register. Her hands paused, as if uncertain whether to continue packing her bag or observe the situation. Her son looked up at Roderick, his eyes wide with confusion. Before either man could react, the manager arrived, and his initial words would drastically alter the room's atmosphere. The store manager's voice pierced the tension, crisp and concise, though somewhat delayed. "Is there a problem over here?" he inquired. He was a short man in his 50s. Heavy-framed glasses, a khaki shirt tucked into worn jeans. A name tag identified him as Vince Callahan, and his darting eyes revealed he's been observing from afar, intervening only as the volume increased. Roderick remained silent initially, wanting to ascertain the recipient of the question. The two men straightened slightly, seemingly realizing they may have overstepped. "It's nothing," the person with the tattoo stated, raising their hands in a gesture of innocence. "We were simply having a conversation," the other person added hastily. "No one made contact with her or anything." Roderick looked toward Vince, who returned his gaze, seemingly unsure of his position in the situation. "Talking?" Roderick inquired, his voice calm. "Is that what you consider talking?" Vince paused. "Look, I just want to avoid any problems in the store. Customers are trying to make purchases." Roderick inhaled deeply. "Were you prepared to allow these two men to harass a woman in front of her children rather than address the issue?" Vince reacted visibly to the statement. A silence fell, and everyone remained still. The mother continued to stand quietly, her hands now carefully arranging items into a single reusable grocery bag. She showed no tears. However, her expression held a detached quality, a type of emotional barrier people develop when they've learned to mask pain for an extended period. Roderick looked at her, then back at Vince. "This isn't about comfort, man. It's about right and wrong." The words weren't loud, but they carried. A woman a few feet away who had been picking out yogurt suddenly nodded and muttered, "He's right." Then someone else, an older man in a camouflage jacket, murmured, "Ain't no need to talk to a lady like that, especially not with her babies standing there." The tide was turning. The two men sensed it. The guy with the earpiece shifted uncomfortably. He stated, his voice quieter, We didn't intend any harm. Just some playful interaction. Roderick turned, shaking his head gently. If causing distress to someone attempting to nourish her children is your idea of fun, a serious self-assessment is necessary. He spoke with clarity, avoiding raised voices or dramatic displays, simply stating facts. The tattooed man muttered something almost inaudible and began to leave. His companion followed suit. Vince made no attempt to detain them. Roderick did not pursue them either. His purpose wasn't to engage in a confrontation. It was to be witnessed asserting himself. Someone had done it, so that woman, her kids, and anyone else in the store would know. Vince remained behind, hands on his hips. "I'll speak with them if they return," he offered, his voice lacking conviction. Roderick didn't respond to him. He turned to the woman instead. "Are you all right?" She looked at him for the first time. Her voice was soft but clear. "Yes, thank you." The little boy peered out from behind his mother's hoodie, his eyes moving between her and Roderick. He remained silent, but he no longer seemed frightened. Roderick offered the kid a small smile. "You assisted your mother today. You performed well." The boy's lips moved slightly, as though he desired to return the smile, but hesitated. The mother then spoke. People generally remain silent. They simply observe, Roderick confirmed. "Yes, I understand. I have been one of those individuals," he stated, meaning his words sincerely. He had remained quiet in different locations, different circumstances, not out of concurrence, but because it was simpler, unlike this time. Just as things seemed to be calming, the boy spoke, causing Roderick to hesitate more than any comment from the adults. Roderick was preparing to take his basket and allow them to proceed without interruption when the boy looked up and quietly asked, "Are you my mom's bodyguard?" The unexpectedness and innocence of the question stopped Roderick in his tracks. The woman immediately turned, her eyes widening. "Baby, please don't say that." Roderick chuckled softly, not in derision, but in genuine surprise. He knelt down to be at the boy's eye level. "No, I'm not your bodyguard," he said, "but I noticed something that seemed amiss. And sometimes, when something is wrong, it's important to speak up." The boy appeared puzzled. "Even if it's not your mother," Roderick paused. "Particularly if it's not your mother." The mother retrieved her bag and reached for her son's hand. "Say thank you," she murmured, her voice remaining calm, but detached. "Thank you," the boy replied. His voice was softer now. Roderick rose, observing their preparations to depart. The toddler had fallen asleep against his sister's shoulder within the cart. The mother offered him a courteous nod, then refocused on her children and proceeded towards the door. Roderick remained standing for a moment longer, his basket dangling limply in his hand. His anger had subsided. He felt weary of encountering individuals who believed they could utter whatever they pleased to whomever, without repercussions. He was weary of seeing children learn those lessons without realizing it. He also felt frustrated by missed opportunities, moments that required the courage to speak up. He walked down the bread aisle, but suddenly everything felt wrong. He no longer felt like shopping. His appetite had disappeared near the frozen pizza. He drifted towards the self-checkout, considering he might just grab a drink, something cold, and leave. As he turned the corner, he saw them once more, the mother and her children, positioned by the vending machines close to the exit. She was searching her purse, likely looking for coins. Her son was sitting on the bench, softly rocking his sleeping sister. Roderick lessened his pace. A portion of him desired to continue walking. He believed he had already fulfilled his responsibility. However, something about her expression. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was weariness. The kind of weariness that doesn't dissipate with rest. The weariness that accumulates over years of being overlooked, criticized, and disregarded. He moved closer, deliberately. "Got enough for the machine?" he inquired. She looked up, visibly surprised. "Oh, I was just checking if I'd change," she explained, adding, "I told him he could choose a snack if he waited patiently." Roderick reached into his pocket and produced a few wrinkled dollar bills. "Let me assist," he offered. She paused. "I didn't request," she began, but he gently interrupted. "You didn't." "I'm offering," she finished. Her expression subtly hardened. It was pride. It mirrored the clothing his mother used to wear. It was the sort of person who prefers self-reliance, yet recognizes respectful assistance when it's provided. She nodded once, her movement now with less uncertainty. Her son selected a pack of cookies and a juice. Roderick inserted the payment and observed the machine's mechanical sounds as it dispensed the item, resembling a somewhat awkward expression of gratitude. "What's your name?" she asked. Roderick extended his hand. "Tanya. Tanya Wells." A tremor passed between them, a connection felt beyond a simple meeting. Her gaze settled on him, clear and unwavering, devoid of gratitude or obligation. Just even. No response was needed back there, she observed. "I know," Roderick replied, "but I didn't want your son to perceive that silence as typical," she confessed, pausing briefly before directing her attention to her boy, who was eagerly opening a package of cookies, as if it were Christmas. "I hope he remembers your face," she said, and Roderick remained silent. He was at a loss for words. However, before he could leave, Tanya posed a question he hadn't anticipated, causing him to observe her and himself with a new perspective. "You got kids?" Tanya inquired. Roderick was taken aback by the question. It was delivered so casually, as if requesting directions. Yet, the underlying significance felt more substantial than the words suggested. He paused, then offered a slight shrug. "No, not mine anyway. My niece has been staying with me. Her mom works nights at the hospital." Tanya nodded, indicating she understood. "So you're the safe place for somebody?" Roderick hesitated. He hadn't previously considered that perspective. He wasn't intentionally trying to be a safe place for anyone. He was simply providing assistance, doing what was necessary. However, the way she phrased it caused a feeling of constriction in his chest. "Trying to be," he replied. They paused briefly in that unusual area situated between two vending machines and an automatic door, which repeatedly opened and closed as customers passed. The exterior air grew darker. The store's illumination made the location feel colder than it actually was. Tanya carefully removed her daughter from the cart, cradling her in one arm. The toddler shifted, appearing drowsy but making no noise. "You don't speak as if you're frightened," she stated. "I wasn't," Roderick responded. He didn't express a desire for a confrontation, she observed, receiving a slight smile in response. "I've experienced conflict before," he stated. "It hasn't altered much. Words did today." Roderick remained silent initially, because, honestly, he wasn't certain what the day had altered, if anything at all. The men departed as if everything were normal. Vince, the manager, offered little resistance. The majority of onlookers simply remained still and watched. However, her son had smiled, and Tanya was still present, standing tall. That surely had to signify something. At that moment, the automatic door opened once more, and the two men from before re-entered. Roderick's body stiffened immediately. Tanya's did too. She held her daughter closer. Her son slid off the bench and moved behind her, as if trying to disappear. However, the men didn't glance in their direction. They kept their gaze ahead, bypassed Roderick entirely, and proceeded toward the rear of the store. Perhaps they would return for beer, or perhaps they had simply forgotten something. They remained silent. They avoided eye contact. They didn't even acknowledge our presence. Roderick didn't pursue them. He didn't need to. Tanya released a long, deep breath. "I anticipated an attempt." "They will not," Roderick stated calmly. "Not tonight." A few feet away, the teenage cashier, the same one who had averted her gaze previously, was now maneuvering a small cart of returns toward the register. She halted as she passed Roderick. "I observed what you did," she said quietly. Roderick turned to her. She looked over at Tanya and her children. "I regret not saying anything," she thought. Roderick nodded thoughtfully. "You will next time." The girl offered a slight, almost self-conscious smile and departed. She made no attempt to turn back. Tanya looked down at her son. "Come on, dear." He clasped her hand, holding tightly onto the cookie pack. Roderick observed them as they walked towards the parking lot, the little girl now fully awake and rubbing her eyes against her mother's shoulder. Tanya glanced back once, their eyes connecting briefly. It wasn't a thank you. It wasn't a farewell. Simply a silent recognition, genuine and sufficient. He turned to depart, retrieving his overlooked basket stepping back to do so. Yet, something felt altered. The eggs could wait. So too could the milk. As he walked out into the night, a personal realization sparked within him, a feeling connected to his past that he hadn't considered in years, triggering a memory with unexpected force. Roderick did not go home immediately. He remained in his truck in the parking lot, with the window rolled halfway down, allowing the warm Baton Rouge air to flow in as the sky transitioned from gray to black. The grocery store lights hummed behind him, fluorescent and seemingly without end, stretching long shadows across the parking lot. He gazed forward for a considerable time, his hands resting on the steering wheel, the engine off, not because he anticipated something, simply thinking, dwelling on a weighty feeling. That boy's question, "Are you my mom's bodyguard?" repeated in his mind, and the way Tanya had said, "You're the safe place for somebody." He hadn't anticipated either of those sentiments to linger, but they had. The recollection that surfaced wasn't dramatic or overwhelming. It was subtle and understated. Perhaps that's why it affected him so deeply. He was 10, waiting in line with his mother at a corner store just outside Port Allen. It was summer, and his shoes were 2 sizes too small. His mother had been working 3 part-time jobs since his dad left. On that day, her EBT card malfunctioned. The cashier, a man with a slicked-back mullet, told her to move aside. Publicly. Next, the man announced, "This woman can't pay." Roderick recalled hearing sighs and shuffles from the people trailing behind them. Someone even chuckled. His mother didn't shed any tears. She simply stood, attempting to understand where things had gone amiss. Her hands had shaken as she entered the numbers on the keypad. Her gaze remained fixed on the screen, as though intense focus might somehow resolve the issue. A man in a gray work shirt, a stranger standing behind them, moved forward and paid. He did so silently, without a word or explanation, simply sliding a 20 across the counter as if it were inconsequential. Roderick also remembered the man's boots. They were scuffed. The clothes were soiled, as if he'd worn them for years. His mother expressed her gratitude 3 times. The man simply replied, "It's all right," and departed. Roderick never forgot that. Not because of the money, but because for one moment someone chose to prevent his mom from feeling insignificant. And now, all these years later, he'd unknowingly become that man. He leaned back in his seat and rubbed his hands over his face. "Safe place for somebody," he muttered, half to himself. He hadn't always gotten it right. There had been moments he remained silent when he ought to have spoken, instances where he averted his gaze. But tonight he did not, and that felt significant, not a resolution, but a beginning. He reached into the glove compartment and retrieved the small notebook where he recorded grocery lists and budget details. He turned to the rear, located a vacant page, and penned 3 words. "Speak. Stand. Stay." He wasn't certain why he wrote them that way, but it felt correct. Like a prompting, like a key. A collection of teenagers in hoodies walked by his truck, laughing and jostling each other, having just left the store with Slurpees and bags of chips. One of them made eye contact and offered a brief nod of recognition. It wasn't elaborate, just a quick movement of the chin. Roderick returned the gesture subtly. He started the engine. The radio began playing softly, featuring an old Otis Redding song. He allowed it to play for a minute before lowering the volume. As he continued his journey, he observed a city bus stop where a mother and her daughter waited, illuminated by the weak light of a street lamp. The young girl rested against her mom's shoulder, seemingly dozing. Roderick reduced his speed as he rounded the bend. That scene also resonated with him. He thought of so many mothers in this area, striving to manage everything, holding on with worn-out resources, and bearing the burden of groceries, children, and societal expectations as if it were simply an obligation. Sadly, they often go unnoticed. He drove into his driveway, turned off the truck, and paused for a moment. But prior to entering the house, he reviewed the notebook one last time, making a silent vow that would resonate well into the future. Roderick stood on his porch beneath a wavering light bulb. The screen door groaned as he opened it. Inside, the modest house held the scent of aged timber and laundry detergent. Lainey was curled up on the couch under a blanket, a textbook resting on her knees and a pencil in her mouth. She looked up as he entered. "You're gone forever," she said. He dropped his keys onto the side table. "Yeah, I ran into something unexpected." "Like what?" Roderick hesitated. She asked it so casually, unaware that her uncle had just been standing between a mother and two grown men poised to overwhelm her regarding a shopping trip. How would you explain that to a 12-year-old so it doesn't feel overwhelming? "I witnessed someone being treated unfairly." I said something. Lainey looked at him. "Did you argue with him?" He chuckled, sounding weary. "No, it wasn't necessary." "Did it make a difference?" He nodded. "It did." Lainey returned to her book, as if that was a sufficient explanation, but Roderick remained standing. He found himself repeatedly recalling Tanya's expression, or her son's inquiry, or the realization that for a brief period that grocery store had served as a learning experience, not only for a frightened little boy or a weary young mother, but for all those within hearing distance, and for him. Roderick had previously believed that demonstrating courage meant confronting situations directly and forcefully, that unless it involved a significant display, it was inconsequential. However, tonight brought a shift in perspective. As his actions were met with silence rather than recognition, they did not become a popular topic. No phones were used. There were no news reports, no widely shared videos. Just a mother, a child, and a man who chose to act instead of remaining silent. Perhaps that's what the world needs, discreet actions that have a subtle impact. Ordinary individuals who recognize an injustice and voice their concerns, prioritizing integrity over apathy. He entered the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. His hands remained stiff. He didn't notice until he placed the cup on the counter. Lainey's lunchbox sat on the counter. He opened it, almost automatically, to see if she's left anything behind. Inside, he found a half-eaten apple and a note he's written her earlier that morning. "You got this. I'm proud of you." He paused, looking at it. 4 short words on a sticky note. And she's kept it. That affected him more than he anticipated, because it reminded him that words don't need to be forceful to resonate. They don't have to be flawless to be significant. He returned to the living room, settled beside Lainey, and observed the math homework she was finding difficult. "Do you need some help?" she offered, silently passing him a pencil. While they solved the problems together, he looked at her, this small, brilliant, stubborn girl, unaware of how frequently the world would challenge her and how vital it would be to advocate for those unable to do so themselves. He wished she would retain this memory of him. He wanted her to recognize someone who championed another person, unrelated and undeserving of such action, yet still in need of protection. That's the essence of strength he hoped she'd see. After finishing the final problem, Lainey looked up and said, "You're like one of the good guys, huh?" Roderick smiled. A genuine smile this time, he tried to convey. She nodded, seeming pleased. "Good." A silence fell between them. The television hummed softly in the background. A dog barked once from somewhere beyond, then fell silent. Roderick relaxed against the couch, allowing the stillness to descend. He wasn't obligated to act as a bodyguard. He simply needed to demonstrate that he cared. And for this evening, that was sufficient. Should you ever witness someone facing unjust treatment and feel compelled to intervene, honor that impulse. Offer a word. Take action. Even minor deeds hold significance. They instruct. They safeguard. They are important. If this narrative resonated with you, even slightly, please share it. Perhaps someone else needs to read this today. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. Real stories like this deserve to be shared. The CEO, known for his quiet demeanor, entered his own dealership incognito. What he overheard a salesman say to a struggling single mother abruptly halted him and initiated an unforeseen sequence of events. Derek Belton appeared unremarkable, certainly not the person who authorized salaries for 137 employees. He wasn't wearing a blazer, didn't carry a briefcase, and he arrived without a driver. That morning, he wore faded Levi's, well-worn sneakers, and a Tennessee Titans cap shading his face. He would be unrecognizable, even to the regional manager he had dined with 2 Fridays prior. He parked his black 2011 Honda Accord a short distance away. It wasn't a necessity, He possessed the means for a garage full of luxury vehicles. However, today was not about displays of wealth. He walked the additional block quietly, noticing the texture of the pavement with each footfall. As the dealership appeared, the signage, crisp and prominent, displaying Belton Auto Group across the glass, caused him to hesitate. His name. But what was happening beneath the surface? The concerns had initially surfaced as quiet remarks. A customer in Murfreesboro reported being sold an extended warranty she didn't comprehend. A family in Franklin alleged their monthly payment differed from the agreed-upon amount. These were minor issues. However, they caused Derek to question things. This location in Charlotte, Tennessee had consistently been a high-volume dealership. It specialized in mid-range vehicles and enjoyed strong sales. People trusted this dealership, or they once did. The showroom doors opened as he entered. The air held the scent of coffee and Armor All. A bell chimed above him, yet no one acknowledged it. Derek surveyed the area. There were 3 sales desks and 2 salesmen engaged in conversation by the corner water cooler. A woman managed the reception desk, absorbed in her phone. He appeared unremarkable, and that was his intention. He began his assessment in the service bay. It was quiet, the technicians working diligently, focused on their tasks. He observed nothing unusual. He proceeded through the customer waiting area, observing a man browse a magazine as his daughter entertained herself on a damaged iPad. He received no assistance. There was no greeting, not even a simple acknowledgement. He approached the line of Camrys situated near the glass wall. A couple stood close by, engaged in a conversation with a salesman whose speech was rapid and overly enthusiastic. The older man appeared displeased. The woman seemed bothered. "Sir," the salesman stated, "you won't locate a more advantageous offer anywhere. This item is covered by warranty and has seen minimal use. However, I can offer this price only if we finalize the agreement today." "That's the current situation," Derek mentioned. He recognized this as a tactic he hadn't been taught and made a note to himself. He then proceeded around a corner close to the used inventory office and paused. A young woman, likely in her late 20s, wearing a light jacket and carrying a baby in a carrier, was speaking with a man in a navy blazer. She appeared anxious, repeatedly looking down at a well-worn envelope she held. It likely contained pay stubs or a bank statement. The salesman presented himself with an assured, perhaps overly confident, demeanor, speaking with charm and certainty. "You're receiving full coverage for the first 3 years?" the salesman stated. "Bumper to bumper plus powertrain. If anything breaks, even the air conditioning, it's covered." That was inaccurate, and the $895 fee I referenced, that's standard practice. We apply that to all our transactions. It covers a comprehensive pre-delivery inspection, interior cleaning, and anti-theft VIN etching. Derek paused. VIN etching? That practice had been removed from the dealership's process 3 years prior. And warranty coverage? No, that wasn't consistent with the terms. He had personally revised those contracts to ensure greater honesty and transparency. His pulse decelerated. He retreated a step back, out of their line of sight, heart pounding, but not from anger. It was disappointment. This was his business. This was his name. And this man was deceiving, with ease, a woman who appeared to have saved every cent to be present. Derek wasn't prepared to show himself. Not yet. He needed to observe the situation's extent. Derek moved discreetly behind a row of brochures close to the finance office, watching unseen. The woman nodded slowly in response to the salesman's words. Her fingers closed more firmly around the envelope. The baby in the carrier shifted and emitted a quiet whimper, but she seemed largely unaware. She was attempting to remain calm, likely assessing how closely the figures aligned with her budget. The salesman leaned in, lowering his voice. "You don't need to worry," he said. "People get nervous about credit checks, but I know how to navigate the process. I'll get you into a vehicle today, even if we have to be resourceful." She hesitated, her eyes flicking toward the exit. But the salesman kept his tone steady, reassuring. Too smooth, too confident, Derek clenched his jaw, then turned away. He didn't want her to feel observed. He walked towards the far end of the showroom. where a teenage boy was standing near a pre-owned SUV. A salesman passed him twice, without a greeting or any offer of assistance. He simply walked by. Derek moved next to the boy. "You're considering this one?" he asked. The teen looked over, seemingly a little taken aback. "Yeah, possibly. My aunt is outside. She asked me to check it out while she parks." Derek nodded. "Do you know what kind of engine it has?" The kid shrugged. "Not really. She simply requires a secure environment. Her vehicle malfunctioned last week, another incident. Another customer was missed. It was hurtful, not due to the lost transaction, but because it confirmed everything for Derek. At some point, they had ceased to listen, stopped acknowledging individuals. And it wasn't just a single problematic employee. It was a prevailing attitude, a recurring behavior. He proceeded towards the reception desk. The woman still hadn't looked up. She tapped her screen, chewing her gum, scrolling. Derek positioned himself in front of her, simply to gauge the situation. 10 seconds elapsed. Then 20. At last, she raised her head and blinked. "Oh, do you have an appointment?" "No," Derek replied calmly. "Just browsing," she responded with a languid smile, gesturing vaguely towards the floor. "They'll get to you." They did not. For the subsequent 30 minutes, Derek moved between various departments. The only assistance he received came from a young lot attendant named Trevor, who appeared to be no older than 19. He noticed Derek close to the service entrance and offered, "Sir, do you need anything? We have water inside. I can get you a brochure if you're interested in the new hybrids." Derek smiled and replied, "I'm good. Thank you." He then asked, "What's your name?" Trevor responded, "Trevor." "Do you like it here, Trevor?" Trevor paused. "It's all right. People can be rude. Not just customers, but sometimes managers too. I prefer to keep to myself." "Do they treat customers fairly?" Trevor looked down. "Most of the time." There was no bitterness in his tone. Derek placed a reassuring hand on the kid's shoulder. "Be careful who teaches you what," he advised. Trevor looked at him, then nodded. Before Derek could say anything further, a familiar laugh came from the glass hallway. Brent Collar, the salesman, was now leading the young mother toward a side office. Her name tag said Brent Collar. She appeared overwhelmed, holding her papers tightly. Derek kept a discreet distance as he watched. Brent paused before the office door, retrieved paperwork from a file, and announced, "Here's the first quote. It's going to appear high initially, but please don't worry. I'll adjust it once I input your information into the system. This is our standard procedure." Derek moved nearer, feigning interest in a flyer on the wall. From his position, he observed the quote. The figures were inflated. Listed were charges for warranty, dealership fees, VIN etching, and a maintenance guarantee, all non-standard and unapproved. This was everything Derek had worked to eliminate years prior. Brent, however, did not appear to be a person apprehensive about disregarding regulations. He presented as someone who believed no one was observing. Brent indicated for the woman to take a seat. She settled into the chair, moving her baby's carrier to the floor nearby. The little girl made a soft whimpering sound and kicked gently, yet Brent did not even look down. His gaze remained focused on the documents he held, turning pages, emphasizing sections, and drawing circles. Each action appeared rehearsed, refined, and routine. "We're going to structure this to ensure your monthly payment stays under $350, he stated. The woman offered a slow, cautious nod. "What's your name again?" he inquired, barely looking up. "Monique," she replied. "Monique Ellis." Derek stood just outside the office, back against the wall, feigning interest in the certified pre-owned display. He overheard every word. Brent smiled. "All right, Monique. You're going to love this. You're approved for a 2019 Corolla. Excellent condition, low mileage. That's a significant advantage. We remain committed to your protection. Therefore, we're providing a 3-year full coverage plan. This includes everything from the engine to the electronics. Roadside assistance is also included should you lock your keys in the car. That level of peace of mind? Priceless." Derek's hand slowly curled into a fist by his side. However, there was no such plan, not like Brent described it. And the quote, the one he'd caught a glimpse of earlier, had extra charges tucked in every margin. Some of them were outright fiction. Monique adjusted in her chair. "So, is all of that included in the price?" Brent offered a warm, reassuring smile. It's all part of your protection package. We simply itemize it separately on the form. This simplifies things for the finance office. He continued, speaking rapidly and with excessive confidence, gesturing with a pen as if performing a magic trick. He even produced a calculator to minimize the appearance of the payment amount. For example, without the package, your monthly cost would be $384. With the included safeguard, the price reduces to $349. More manageable, isn't it? Derek scrutinized the figures. That calculation appeared illogical. It seemed like a deceptive tactic. He couldn't fathom how Brent maintained his composure. But it was evident this wasn't his first presentation. Then Monique posed a question that silenced the room. Do you believe I could return tomorrow? She inquired softly. I simply want to ensure I fully grasp everything first. Brent's demeanor subtly altered, a nearly imperceptible change. His jaw tightened briefly. However, he quickly regained his composure, adopting a more affable tone. I completely understand, he said smoothly. But the situation is that this car has two other potential buyers. One of them test drove it earlier today. I can't guarantee it will still be available tomorrow. You wouldn't want to miss out because of a minor consideration, would you? Monique blinked. Her fingers shifted around her envelope. Brent quietly lowered his voice, leaning closer. Listen, I've witnessed individuals leave, intending to consider it further overnight. Then the car was gone, and they were facing a situation that was more difficult and costly. You deserve something better, and this is it. He pushed the documents across to her. That was the end of it. Derek entered the office, maintaining a calm but resolute tone. That doesn't sound like the protection plan we provide, Brent said, blinking. Monique turned to Derek, appearing surprised. Brent quickly regained his composure. Pardon me? Derek repeated, the plan you're describing doesn't exist, not in that form. Brent lifted an eyebrow, assessing Derek. Do you work here? Something like that. Brent chuckled dryly. Look, I don't know who you are, but I've been here for 4 years. I know the packages inside and out. Derek pointed to the quote. Show me where it says full electronics coverage. Show me where VAR and etching is required. Show me the breakdown. Brent hesitated. It's in the system. Finance will explain it better. No, Derek said flatly. You explain it right now. Monique rose slowly in front of her, holding her baby close. Brent's face flushed. I don't have to deal with this. You're not even. But he stopped speaking. The general manager had just appeared behind Derek, his eyes wide. Mr. Belton, the manager said. Brent's mouth dropped open. Derek didn't smile, didn't say a word. He turned toward Monique. I'm sorry, he said softly. This isn't how we treat people. Not here, not under my name. But this wasn't over, not yet. The repercussions extended beyond a single falsehood. The room seemed to contract the instant the name, Mebleton, was spoken. Brent's complexion turned ashen. His assured demeanor disappeared, as if it were vapor on a chilled surface. Monique looked back and forth between the two men, bewildered, still cradling her baby, uncertain of the situation she's entered. Derek subtly turned to the general manager, standing in the doorway. He requested a conference room, speaking softly. Jeff Lorman, the manager, a man with a flushed face, nodded and indicated a hallway located at the rear of the showroom. Derek turned to Monique and spoke in a quiet, reassuring voice. Please come with me. I want to correct this. She paused briefly, then followed. Her movements were deliberate but hesitant. The baby began to stir again, perhaps reacting to the palpable tension. As they passed the workstations, the entire level appeared to become silent. Telephones ceased their ringing, and conversations were interrupted. Several employees glanced over their workstations and angled towards one another, speaking quietly. Trevor, the lot attendant from earlier, positioned himself close to the entrance and offered Derek a knowing look, but remained silent. Within the compact, glass-enclosed conference room, Derek drew out a chair for Monique and settled opposite her. Jeff entered behind them, appearing noticeably uneasy. Brent followed, attempting to seem unconcerned but without success. He folded his arms and rested against the distant wall. Derek took the folder Brent had put on the table. Is this the quote you gave her? He asked, not looking up. Brent moved slightly. Yes. Derek opened the folder, laid out the pages, and circled several numbers with a pen from the table's holder. Explain these, he said. Brent sat up straighter. Look, I don't know why I'm being questioned. Explain them, Brent paused. He looked at Jeff, hoping for support, but Jeff avoided his gaze. I mean, those are standard charges. Everyone includes them. Do you have documentation showing these fees were authorized? Derek inquired. They should be in the system. No, they aren't, Derek replied, his voice gaining strength. I was involved in revising the system. That VIN etching fee? It was discontinued in 2021. Powertrain coverage? It's limited to 5 years, not the comprehensive coverage you advertised. You added more than $2,000 in fabricated fees to a customer who came here simply trying to purchase a secure vehicle for her baby. Monique's hands trembled a little as she listened, but she did not speak. Her gaze remained on the document. You stated the payment would be $349, Derek proceeded. That is achievable only if she provides a down payment you failed to disclose. Furthermore, the interest rate you presented to her is inflated by a minimum of 2.5%. You are not just misleading Brent, you are being dishonest. Brent moved away from the wall and straightened. I have consistently met my quarterly goals. Customers leave satisfied. I understand sales, all right? Derek moved closer. You know how to apply undue influence. A distinction exists. Jeff finally spoke. Derek, I didn't know he was doing all that, I swear. We've been busy and the numbers have been good. That's exactly the problem, Derek interjected. You cared about the numbers, I cared about the people. Monique rose then, slowly, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. I thought this was a good place, she said quietly. I really thought this was different. Derek turned to her. It was supposed to be, and I'm sorry it wasn't. He reached into his back pocket, retrieved his wallet, and produced a card. This is my direct line. I will personally ensure you receive a fair deal. If you desire the car, you'll obtain it at the correct price, free of unnecessary complications. She accepted the card deliberately. Thank you, she said. We'll have someone else manage the paperwork, Derek added. Someone who doesn't fabricate figures. Brent's arms fell to his sides. Clean out your desk, Derek stated, rising. You are terminated here. There was no room for discussion. You were aware of that, yet disregarded it. Brent didn't object further. He left abruptly, speaking quietly to himself. No one pursued him. Derek addressed Jeff. We aren't finished talking either. He stated, I'll see you in your office in 10. Subsequently, he held the door for Monique and guided her back towards the lobby. People glanced around. Conversations began anew, subdued and apprehensive. Derek remained silent until they arrived at the reception desk. He regarded the woman seated there. Did you greet her upon her arrival? The receptionist hesitated, then swallowed. I don't recall. Derek slowly shook his head. Begin to recall, or begin searching. However, dismissing a single employee wouldn't resolve the underlying issues. Derek recognized that a cultural shift was necessary, or the company would decline from within. Derek was seated alone in Jeff Lorman's office, gazing out at the dealership floor through the blinds. A heavy silence filled the room. From behind the closed door, the usual showroom sounds had resumed. The usual sounds filled the office, casual chatter, the click of footsteps on tile, and ringing phones. However, a new feeling now permeated the atmosphere, a sense of unease. He glanced up as Jeff entered, his movements uncertain. The man appeared diminished, as if suddenly aware of his oversight. Jeff took a seat without prompting. I was unaware, he said softly. I truly swear to you, Derek, I wasn't aware Brent was engaging in that activity. But you were aware of something, Derek responded. You knew complaints were increasing. You were aware that deals were becoming more competitive. You were also aware that customer satisfaction scores decreased last quarter, and you attributed it to the surveys used. Jeff remained silent. Derek moved forward, resting his elbows on the desk. What happened to what we created here? He asked. I thought we were performing well, Jeff stated. The numbers were strong. Staff turnover was minimal. I assumed perhaps the industry simply shifted slightly. The industry didn't shift, Derek responded. maintaining a calm tone. We did. We lost sight of why people initially came here. We ceased prioritizing customer relationships and began focusing on achieving sales targets. Jeff sighed, massaging his face. So what's the plan? We need a thorough overhaul, Derek stated. And that extends beyond dismissing Brent. I require a review of every transaction from the past 90 days. Reimburse any clients where the terms weren't transparently conveyed. Furthermore, I want individual meetings with each salesperson. I need to understand their training processes, the priorities they receive, and to identify anyone else who believes it's acceptable to deceive customers with a friendly demeanor. Jeff acknowledged slowly. And one more thing, Derek added, I want Trevor in my office next week. Jeff blinked. The lot kid? Derek replied, yeah, he's one of the only ones who looked a customer in the eye today. That matters. A knock at the door interrupted them. The receptionist appeared, visibly nervous. Mr. Belton, the customer, Monique Ellis, is still in the lounge, she said. She said she's waiting for her ride. Derek stood. Please get her a bottle of water and offer her a seat in the private lounge, away from the plastic chairs near the vending machine. Make sure she feels valued. The receptionist acknowledged promptly and went to attend to the request. Derek returned to the showroom. Several employees glanced up, but there was no conversation. Some consciously avoided eye contact. Monique was situated in the far corner, her baby now asleep in the carrier beside her. She appeared weary, not only physically, but also emotionally drained. He approached her gently. This is a lot, he admitted. More than you anticipated, she replied with a gentle smile. I've faced tougher situations, he stated. I understand that, but you shouldn't have had to experience this, she said, shrugging. People deceive me frequently. It happens at work, in shops, and even at the clinic. I'm accustomed to it. That comment resonated more deeply than he anticipated. You shouldn't be exposed to that. Certainly not here. That's my responsibility. She then focused on him, truly observing him. Why did you come in today? Why are you dressed like that? Derek offered a soft smile. She stifled a quiet chuckle, noting people rarely shared the full truth with the man in the suit. He then presented her with a small folder. If you're still interested in that car, these are the accurate figures. There are no hidden details. I had our finance manager verify them directly. Furthermore, we've included a year of service maintenance at no cost. Her eyebrows rose in surprise. Why? He replied, because someone needs to remind this place of its values. Shortly after, a silver hatchback, distinguished by a missing hubcap, arrived to take her away. Her sister signaled from the driver's seat. Monique rose, corrected the carrier, and glanced back at Derek. Don't let them ruin what you built, she said. I won't, he replied. She exited without a backward look. But restoring Monique's confidence was not the only task. It involved rebuilding the confidence of every person who had ever entered those doors. Derek returned 3 days later. This time, there was no disguise, no cap, no jeans. He was dressed in a tailored navy suit and entered through the front doors as if he belonged. And in truth, he did. This wasn't intended as a display of dominance. It was a matter of responsibility. The entire staff had received notification that morning. Scheduled meetings were canceled, and phone lines were redirected to voicemail. The dealership remained open, but no sales transactions would occur prior to 11 a.m. Derek had arranged a company-wide meeting, and every employee attended, including those on part-time shifts. The group assembled in the break room, squeezed together amongst vending machines and aged chairs. Several were leaning against the walls. Trevor stood toward the rear, his arms crossed, but attentive. Jeff was seated near the front, a notebook open but unused. Derek addressed them, speaking plainly without a microphone or podium. I established this company in 2004, he began, not through investors or a franchise agreement, but with a used car lot situated behind a barbecue joint in Murfreesboro. During the first week, I sold 3 cars, personally washing each one. Some individuals quietly expressed amusement. At that time, I wasn't sure if I would succeed, but I possessed 2 valuable assets: my reputation and my commitment to honesty. I consistently ensured I could fulfill any promise made and avoided dishonesty when closing deals. The atmosphere in the room was now quiet. However, a significant shift has occurred, he continued. This isn't limited to a single salesperson. It's about how we compromise on minor details and prioritize speed over customer care. We've begun to see individuals as sales goals rather than human beings. That's not what I built. That's not who we are. He looked around the room. If you've ever included an additional charge because you believed you could, if you've ever hurried a woman out the door because she didn't appear to be able to afford our services, if you've ever spoken condescendingly to someone simply because you were able, today marks a turning point. A few people visibly expressed discomfort. You have a choice, he said. The situation demanded a resolution, either assistance or a new employment opportunity. Silence followed, then a voice spoke up. It was Trevor, Mr. Belton, and Derek turned to him. Yeah, Trevor said, appearing nervous, but proceeding anyway. What if some of us were performing well, but no one acknowledged it? Derek smiled. Then we need to start noticing. Starting today, he walked over and handed Trevor a small envelope. Inside was a letter of promotion, from lot attendant to junior sales associate, including full training and benefits. Trevor blinked. Are you serious? Derek stated, because the people who treat others with respect are the ones I want representing my name. Following the meeting, changes occurred rapidly. Brent's deals were reviewed. 5 of them necessitated full or partial refunds. Monique's case served as the focus of a training seminar. Every single manager was obligated to participate in a 3-week ethics and customer care workshop. Derek even re-engaged a retired employee. Arlene Cupp, a direct woman in her 60s who previously managed the front desk, had departed 2 years prior, citing a change in the atmosphere. She was now the new head of customer relations. Arlene's initial action involved installing a glass wall separating the sales desk and the finance office, ensuring transparency in all communications. Derek walked through the lot that Friday, observing the staff's interactions. A subtle shift permeated the atmosphere, not flawless, but calmer, more deliberate, stemming from understanding rather than apprehension. He observed a young salesperson patiently explaining trim-level differences to an older gentleman, ensuring he was heard. This detail, absent from any spreadsheet, held greater significance than any monthly performance goal. Arlene approached. It appears they recall their employer, she remarked, and rightfully so. Derek responded, stating he wasn't leaving, although one element remained. The core reason for this endeavor needed to be revisited. That Sunday morning, Derek was seated on the porch of his mother's former residence in Jackson, Tennessee. The sun had just begun to rise, and the air retained the stillness of the early hours. He took his coffee slowly, looking out at the yard he previously mowed every Saturday during his teenage years. Years had passed since her passing, yet the atmosphere of the place remained unchanged. Now, it belonged to him, recollection solidified in brick and wood. He retrieved a photograph from his jacket pocket, the image faded with curled edges. The picture showed him, no older than 10, standing next to his mother before a dull, rust-colored Oldsmobile. Her smile was broad and proud, not due to the car's newness as it wasn't, but because it was hers. That marked the day she purchased her first vehicle independently. He recalled how she, a nurse, managed without a cosigner or assistance, relying solely on her paycheck and a salesman who painstakingly explained each document before she signed. Derek remembered her meticulously verifying every detail. He remembered her asking questions, even when her voice wavered, and how the man behind the desk never made her feel inadequate for doing so. He remembered that. And now, decades later, he occupied the man's position behind the desk. He was the man whose name appeared above the showroom. He was the person who influenced every customer's experience upon entering. He looked at the picture once more. That instance profoundly impacted him, teaching him that dignity wasn't something acquired through wealth. It was something inherent, deserved simply by being present and making an effort. The world hadn't been kind to his mother, but on that day, she received recognition, and he carried that with him. Returning to the dealership the following week, Derek requested a new plaque be installed by the entrance. The message stated that we treat each customer as if they were purchasing their first car, demonstrating dignity, patience, and honesty. It wasn't intended for widespread attention or media coverage. The goal was for every employee to read it daily. Trevor read it every morning, first thing. Monique returned a month later to have her car serviced. She entered wearing a hoodie, holding her daughter, and smiled upon seeing Trevor at the desk. "You remember me?" she asked. He smiled in return. "Of course I do. We had her in that silver Corolla, correct?" She affirmed. "She's performing well." They continued their conversation briefly, covering minor details, and the interaction felt comfortable, because now it felt natural. Derek observed from his office, unnoticed, simply watching. He didn't require attention. He desired none. The focus wasn't on him. The purpose was this: you don't establish a successful business solely on profit. You build it on trust, on the manner in which you treat people when you believe no one is observing. He learned that from his mom. He communicated this to others via Brent. And now, with each handshake, each sale, each explanation provided without pressure or misleading information, he was restoring it. Incrementally, deliberately, that's what integrity truly represents. Not something asserted, something safeguarded. For once lost, regaining it demands all your resources. And Derek Belton refused to allow his reputation to signify anything other than honesty. If this story resonated with you personally, if it brought to mind a time you felt disregarded, or a time someone championed you when they weren't obligated to, please subscribe. We have more stories coming that speak to the heart, not just the headline.